In today's show, we're talking shooting guard tiers. Yeah, point guards yesterday, shooting guards today. Michael Bolton now.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. You can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. So, yesterday myself and Matt Smith did point guard tiers. Today we're doing shooting guard tiers. A couple of things before Matt comes on. You can hear us discuss what we mean by tiers in yesterday's show. I also apologize again. I was going to do some points league stuff in it, and I had some real screw-ups behind the scenes, and that's all fixed, hopefully, fingers crossed. And I've got some point guard tiers here, as well as tiers using a new metric that I have not fully 100% finished developing. Bear that in mind, but I am going to put it up at tiers just to see how things can change based on the way that things are viewed, right? That's mainly my point here. The new metric is going to be called Durant, and it stands for Dynamic Unbiased Rankings Applying Normalized Transformations. That's what it stands for. I'm going to do a show on this discussing it, probably, well, maybe the weekend. I'll see when it goes, all right? But we're going to talk about the tiers that Matt has up on Basketball Monster. We're going to do points league tiers, and we're going to do my Durant tiers as well. Just a quick little overview, again, just to show how things can change. And one of the big takeaways that I'm really going to hammer home this fantasy offseason, fantasy draft season, is how small differences are and how big an impact variance can be. And I've been discovering so many weird statistical anomalies in doing all this work that it's really important to note. And honestly, I think it's kind of groundbreaking for fantasy, some of the stuff that I've seen. I've never seen anybody talk about it before, and I think it's going to change, I hope it's going to change, a lot of the ways that you think about looking at fantasy basketball. So we're going to talk shooting guard tiers. We might as well get straight into it now. Let's get Matt in. All right, he's back. He is here. It is, of course, the one and only Matt Smith.
Smitty.
Matt, welcome back to the show. It is shooting guards tiers. We don't have to tell people what tiers mean. I've already given them a slight preamble before you came on. We talked about it at length at the beginning of yesterday's show. So we're going to come straight in here and talk about shooting guards. Is there something, though, when we look at the shooting guards in comparison to the point guards as just an overall view of the group or the position, of course, understanding that players will switch between them and there'll be shooting guards, small forwards, and point guards, shooting guards, all that sort of stuff. But as a group, how do you view the shooting guard position compared to point guards?
I don't think the shooting guard group is as deep as the point guards. We saw guys like, Josh Giddey down a fair way, Markelle Fultz down a fair way. Probably don't have that in the shooting guard tiers. I guess there's also a few guys we're waiting on for some trades to potentially go down, which will affect a number of these guys as well. So that's really hard to factor in. But yeah, still got some really good options up the top, and yeah, got some couple of really nice sleepers later on for people to have a think about as well.
There's one thing I want to say about these tier shows, and I know that people will really love this and they'll hang out for it and wait for it. But like, it sounds like weird for me to say this, but I don't want people to look at these tiers and just hang on every word that we say, or use this as an absolute Bible as to what you're doing and when you're drafting. Because stuff is going to change in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and sometimes it is okay to move guys around into different areas because the margins that we deal with in so many of these things are not particularly huge, and we've tried to find good delineations between the groups, but a marginal change in one player can have ripple effects through 6, 7 other guys and move tiers around for so many different guys. So don't be just completely, this is all that I need, because I just don't think it is, Matt.
No, it's not. And I was finalising my centre tiers today, and that's probably the hardest position because we've got so many players who are elite in, your rebounds, your blocks, and your field goals, but yet poor in free throw and threes and steals and assists and other categories. So it's really hard to try and compare all of those players and put them in some sort of order, in inverted commas, about, when we get to draft day. And obviously, your strategy is going to depend on where guys go your format, your settings. So these all need to be taken into account. But yeah, like I said, in point guards, really encourage people to use this as a bit of a template and then shuffle guys up and down as they need.
Yeah, I haven't seen your centre tiers. Actually, I haven't put them out, but I'm going to guess that there's a little bit more depth in that because I've looked at your other ones, like your small forward and power forward, and some of those, the small forward one, there's not many guys in the small forward tier. It's pretty thin, and I think centre might be a little bit deeper than people expect.
Yeah, centre's definitely the deepest position I think this year, which hasn't been the case in previous years, but yeah, and a really interesting mix of young and old as well. And who's coming up and which older players are sliding down. So that's really going to be interesting heading into draft season about where will those guys sort of go on draft day.
Enough about centers because we're talking shooting guards. Let's talk tier 1. It's pretty obvious, I think, who it is. It is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who has an ADP of 7 on Yahoo. I for sure thought that he'd go in the top 4 of basically every draft, but I'm wrong, which, again, is fine. 4 on Fantrax, 7 on ESPN. It's really hard, I think, for anybody to debate that Shai is worthy of this spot. I'm always going to have some concerns of someone taking gigantic leaps forward in 6 categories, whatever he did in 1 year, and expecting all of them to stay at that same level. So, yeah, there is a risk there that if he's been 81, 81, 81, 81, 91 from the line, and then added 5 more attempts per game, which makes you go, oh, what if that is 86? Like, what happens there? But that doesn't dissuade you from taking him in this area. What if he loses 1 or 2 usage points? That's fine. It doesn't dissuade you from taking him in this area. And as we go on about, Matt, you're not going to make a mistake picking Shai here, but I don't think that he's topped out. He's been great in the World Cup, but there are just, again, we're talking minuscule margins here. Instead of 91% on 11 attempts, if he's 88% on 9 attempts, well, it's a change. And someone can easily jump ahead or he can slide back down. And it is a change.
Yeah, it is. And Shai's just turned 25 years of age, and it's hard to talk about a guy who, in his last season when he was 24, potentially having the best season of career. Yep. Like, normally that's not the case. The best seasons are coming sort of 26, 27, 28 years of age. But yeah, like you said, that massive boost in efficiency, the steals are up, the blocks are up, the points went through the roof. I think we might see a little bit of that come back to the field, and those stat lines from last year would be hard to repeat, but I'm still taking him in the top 5. And even if he drops down to say 8 or 10, it's not going to have a big impact on your team overall.
The other thing I think I could look at 2 things that Shai can improve on. More assists, it is hard with Giddy there, and he hits more threes. But of course, we know what happens, Matt. When someone hits more threes, their field goal percentage goes down. That's just what happens. So he was able to jump up to 51% because he never took any threes. So he starts taking them again, it goes back to 47%. And then does the improvement in threes offset the decrease in field goal percentage? Maybe, maybe not. But they are things that can happen pretty regularly. If I go and have a look at my points league tiers and my Durant tiers for shooting guards, well, it's the same. It's no difference there. Shai is in tier 1 for both of those different formats that we've got there. And then we're going to come back in a second and we're going to look at tier 2. Before I do that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready for NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers, not just new customers, all customers who bet $5 get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use and you can be on everything from spreads to player props, money lines, futures, over-unders, whatever it is all there. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer that you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Don't forget to gamble responsibly. We are tier 2, Matty, in shooting guards, and it's Kyrie. It's Kyrie. Now, there is obviously an element of concern with weird absences. He hasn't been injured for 3 years because he sat all those games out due to weird absences. But he's undeniably an unbelievably good NBA player and fantasy player. He didn't suffer a massive hit really joining Luka Doncic. In fact, I think Luka probably suffered more of a hit than what Kyrie did. Where would you be comfortable looking at Kyrie? Because I agree, he's pretty clearly in his tier of his own. There will be someone who will argue this. I've got no doubt about that. But where would you be comfortable taking Kyrie?
Probably late first, early second. And I mentioned this yesterday in point guards. There's a whole group after that sort of top 8 with Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving. We don't know what's happening with Damian Lillard. We don't know what's happening with James Harden. So there's a lot of unknowns in that range, and I think we can include Kyrie. Like you said, he just has this ability to miss games for random reasons. You mentioned that he has been healthy, and that hasn't always been the case throughout his career. So we do need to factor that in as well. So yeah, I think he's probably in that late first to early second range, but I would want to pair him with someone I'm pretty confident can stay out on the court, because when Kyrie does miss his 15 or 20 games throughout the season, you are really going to rely on that other player to step up and carry your team.
Yeah, last year I was happy taking him at like 12 or 13, and I think that's probably the same, to be honest. The risk is there, but there's 20 guys in that area. There's not 20, that's an exaggeration, but there's a bunch of guys in that area who have similar, if not more, risks. And the thing with Kyrie is I literally have no question about his production. I've got no issue with that. I know what he's going to do. I don't worry about what a teammate is going to do to his numbers. I don't worry about him having a weird outlier in one category. He's just done the same thing for years and years and years. I don't worry about any of that. It's just all the other stuff. And then you've got a whole bunch of other players who have similar concerns there. So I do agree with you on that one in terms
of...
Go ahead.
Right now, would you take Irving over Harden?
Yeah, I would, actually. There's too much uncertainty for me with Harden. And while I do like Harden's game, I think that where he goes, it's probably going to be a team where he is unlikely to see a usage rise. And he still can get those assists, but yeah, I think his free throws, he was only at like 5.5 attempts a game. And that was always one of his big strengths, getting 10 of those a game. And if he's a third scoring type option, that does hurt. Mm-hmm. And again, pair that with uncertainty, whereas I'm not sure what Harden's per game production will be, and I'm uncertain about his situation, which is the other thing with Kyrie. His situation could be anything, but I know what he's going to do.
Irving over Lillard?
I don't know about that. I probably would because I do think that, again, Lillard would suffer some sort of a hit heading to Miami. Not as big as the hit that Bam would, but we see it often that players changing teams, there's often a baked-in reduction in their numbers because of just a fit, a coach, other players. Something seems to just always be a little bit off in those scenarios, and it doesn't always happen, but uncertainty paired with, how does that work? Well, I'll just push him down a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm throwing out these names because these are the sort of decisions that everyone's going to have to make come draft day.
Yeah.
So, everyone should be ranking their top 10 or 12 players, or the first round, or whatever it is. And then after that, it completely changes depending on who you took in the first round or second round or third round.
Yeah, agree. You have your first 20 or so and be ready to go and move on from there. Let's have a look at the other tier 2 here for point guards. My Durant system, a little bit interesting. Paul George and Anthony Edwards jumped up into tier 2. And in points leagues, Anthony Edwards was clearly on his own in a tier 2. Now, I have a level of skepticism about Anthony Edwards for this upcoming season as well. Everyone just seems to think he's taking this gigantic leap, but I'd like the bloke to improve his shooting at some point. It just hasn't happened. I do think he's going to be good, but he needs to pass more. He needs to improve his free throws and field goal percentage, but I am banking some of that in. But that's how those two guys come in. So Kyrie is there at that number 2 spot, and Paul George obviously has more risk than Kyrie injury-wise with the way that his body's been going. But I think he's one of those guys that on a per-game basis, Matt, gets seems like underrated every season, and people always they seem to tie him and Kawhi together. The amount of arguments I've had with people that told me that Paul George sat every back-to-back last year. I go, well, he just didn't. He missed a couple because he hurt his hamstring and came back and sat one of them the first game back, but he didn't, and he just gets tied into the Kawhi story.
Yeah, and I get where people are coming from, but again, you do need to treat the players on individual merit and an individual basis and what's best for your team. So, and this is a good segue to my tier 3.
It is a good segue to your tier 3 because we've got Anthony Edwards in there. We've got Donovan Mitchell in there. And I noticed that when I did this morning, Paul George wasn't in your tier 3, but he is on your tier 3 at the moment. But we'll put him in there now, Matt. So we've got Edwards, Mitchell, and Paul George. Edwards' ADP is pushing right up almost into the first round, 14, 13, 21. Mitchell's middle of the second round, and George's is way later than that. So when we talk about where Paul George compares to these, I think he is significantly lower. But between Edwards and Mitchell, if you are sitting at the start of the second round, you're always going to have a choice between these two, I'm guessing. But I don't think it's as clear. I don't think it's crystal clear that Edwards is a better pick than Mitchell. I'll put it that way.
No, I don't think it is either. I think they're very, very close. Both going to be elite scorers. really good threes, strong rebounds, okay assists, both really good steals. Donovan Mitchell has the advantage from the free throw line. Like you said, that's something that Anthony Edwards really needs to improve on and probably get his field goal percentage up as well. That's what he needs to take his game to the next level and jump up into that first round conversation. And Paul George, just that injury risk. As you mentioned, he's played 189 of 308 regular season games over the past 4 seasons. So that's a big risk in the second round. And that Donovan Mitchell v. Anthony Edwards battle is pretty juicy there in the second round.
Like, if I want to talk, though, about Shai having this big increase in free throw percentage and maybe it doesn't stick, I do have to talk about Mitchell having an increase in usage and an increase in field goal percentage at the same time, which is a really hard thing to, A, do and then B, maintain. So it's not set in stone that he's going to maintain that improved level of efficiency that he had last season. And I think, from memory serves, his assist numbers dwindled as the season went on, which was one of those things that was keeping him pretty high early on, and that did start to taper off. So there are question marks about a lot of different guys, and Mitchell's not immune to that questioning. In terms of my tier 3 there, the tiers for me get a little bit larger around this area. In my Durant tier 3, it is Mitchell, Irving, and Jordan Poole, who I think is good. I picked Poole at pick 42 in a mock draft the other day, and people hated it, Matty, but we're going to talk a little bit more about him later. And in points leagues, I've got Kyrie, Donovan Mitchell, Paul George, Jordan Poole, and Jaylen Brown, all in tier 3. And when we get into this later on, you'll see that these points league tiers, we don't go quite as deep as the tiers that you've got set out here. I think I've only got them in 10 different tiers because I was trying to develop this tiering formula for the rankings, and it only pushed it out to 10 different tiers. So that's why you'll see a few more players push into some of these ones. So a bit of a larger tier 3 there. And
Donovan Mitchell is already 27 as well. Anthony Edwards has just turned 22. So Mitchell might be at his peak already, or peak last season, where we still expect Anthony Edwards to take another leap at some stage. So it could be as early as this year when we see Anthony Edwards above Mitchell, at the end of the season.
How do you view a peak of a player? I have a pretty general rule, relatively general, that once a player is 29, right, that is it, right? That is generally the absolute best. That is not to say that when they are 30 they get worse, but it's just to say they're probably not going to get better. And their peak, the better players, the peak might go from 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. It might be like the slightest of curves, like really, really small curve. Or it might be someone who peaks at 29 and starts to dip, and by age 32 they're complete toast. But from doing this for a long time and looking at a lot of data, it seems to me that the tipping point is generally around age 29.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. I think sort of that 29 to 30 range also depends on the position. I think centers can drop off a lot quicker than, say, guards. Like, we're thinking that your Rudy Gobert's and Clint Capella's are probably now on the decline.
Yeah, shout out to Andre Drummond.
Brook Lopez makes a mockery of that discussion last year when he had this outlier of a season. Nikola Vucevic now probably on his decline. And depends on the style of player as well. Ja Morant, someone who's super explosive and already had a few ankle injuries. So does that sort of hurt him at the back end of his career and the wear and tear on his body? So I'd throw in the style of play and what position into that mix as well.
And decline doesn't mean trash. It just means not necessarily getting better. It means losing 0.02% of production or whatever it is. It just doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't mean that you're not a starter anymore. It just means that you're probably never going to just get past that number. You're going to be at this whatever level it is, and it's just going to probably start to trickle down over the next couple of years. Tier 4, we've got old mate Des Bain sitting here by himself. I'm going to guess, Matty, that if we were tiering this for the first 2 months, he'd be maybe knocking on the door of tier 2.
Yeah, potentially, or probably 3 with Mitchell and Edwards. He could be up in that sort of top 20 kind of range. I expect him probably be more between 20 and 30 season long. Super strong efficiency as well from a wing, which can be really valuable, but probably a little bit more valuable with that efficiency in roto leagues than he is in head-to-head leagues. But either way, still really like him, and he should take on a lot more responsibility early in the season while Ja Morant is out.
The thing is, a lot of the rankings numbers will spit out these super high numbers. Or Bain is 18th at the moment, or 24th at the moment. But when you look at it, it's like bits and pieces of production. It's not like, wow, you killed it in this number. He's just really like, he's solid. He's above average. He's in the top 25% of players in 6 categories or whatever, and then 50% of categories or 50% of players in 2 categories, whatever it is. He's just got that. It's almost the way that Rudy Gay used to operate, where it's just like, we're just going to give you average numbers right across the board. And I think Bain's scoring is obviously going to rise, and his assists are probably going to have to jump up at the beginning of the year. It's probably going to tail off. So be really cautious about drafting him, even if you try and average out the production, because of course, when the fantasy playoffs roll around, you're not going to be getting the average production. Might be getting top 20 at the start and then 40th in the playoffs. And if you're picking him in the middle at 30, well, that doesn't make sense for the playoffs. So there is a risk in it, right? We're doing this all based on averages, and they're one of the drawbacks when you've got a peak and a clear peak and a clear area where it's probably going to decline. There is a risk with that, I think.
Yeah, and when you've mapped out his projection as well, he's, like you said, very even across the board, but his biggest advantage in terms of categories is actually threes. And we know that threes you can get later on in drafts and easily off the waiver wire. So, the points and assists and steals and free throw percentage are all good. The field goal is about league average, but are we sort of overpaying for those threes in a category that can we make up later on? So therefore, can you maybe potentially use this draft pick a little bit better and get some of those categories that are a little bit more scarce?
That's possible. Let's have a look at the Tier 4 through Durant and through points leagues. Well, I do have Bain sitting there in Durant by himself in Tier 4 as well. And then in points leagues, he is there in Tier 4 along with Zach LaVine and Bradley Beal. Remember, the points league tier has pushed a little bit further down because it was a larger Tier 3. So LaVine and Beal jump into Tier 4 there along with Bradley Beal for points leagues. Let's go into Tier 5. Matt, Jordan Poole is here. Again, he sits in this tier on his own. There will be people that look at this and they'll go, Jordan Poole, he was trash last year. He's going to kill you in field goal percentage. He's going to take so many shots. And I just don't think I care. Like this guy, we talk about the differences in Bain being average, above average in a lot of categories. Poole's going to score a lot. It might be 27 a game, right? He might hit 3.5 threes. He might average 6.5 assists, and he might get to the line 7 times and hit 90% of his free throws. Like he might do all of those things, and they're all bloody really valuable. He also might shoot 41% on 20 attempts, and that can be tough, but it's also like getting those other numbers are really, they're basically impossible to do once you get past this. So you've got to sort of bite the bullet and decide, do you want to lean into these other numbers? The risk, I guess, with Poole is, March, April, does he play? Are the Wizards just sitting blokes down? Like there's no prize like Wembanyama in this draft, and there's not going to be as many teams as bad, but does he sit down through your incorrectly scheduled fantasy playoffs?
I mean, potentially, and that's something, we do have to factor in, when we are drafting these players, and particularly, obviously, in head-to-head leagues, what's going to happen come March and April. But, I do prefer Poole in head-to-head leagues over rotisserie leagues for that reason, because he is going to be that difference maker in points, threes, potentially assists and free throw percentage, and give you that big boost you need to win those categories each week.
Yeah, exactly. Tier 5 in Durant and points, we've got Jaylen Brown sitting there in Durant, and then DeJounte Murray and Tyrese Maxey in points leagues. Jaylen Brown has not appeared in our regular ranking tiers. Matty, I do feel that he is coming up in this next group, which is a larger tiering for you in Tier 6. We've got Jaylen Brown, Zach LaVine, Bradley Beal, and I just again noticed that another name is missing off this tier, which is annoying. DeJounte Murray, you moved into. I think there was some issue with the tiers over on Basketball Monster today, and that is what is accounting for the issue. But Brown, LaVine, Beal, and DeJounte Murray into Tier 6 here. You'll notice there is a decent discrepancy between like Beal's ADP at 64 and Jaylen Brown's at 41. That's almost 2 rounds difference, but we're putting them in the same spot. I thought that people would be more bullish on Beal this season, but it seemed that they've pushed even further away, and I seem to be probably higher on him than others are.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think out of Booker and Durant, he is going to be the one who has the biggest impact. He obviously had a really good season last year in Washington, so we'll see how things play out. I think he probably can still hold top 50 value, but I don't think he's going to be a top, 30 or 35 player. Jaylen Brown, we know what he can do. He's going to give your team a big boost in scoring in this range. Zach LaVine, 77 games played last season. That was a huge win for managers who drafted him, and that should give people some confidence heading into this season, still in the prime of his career as well. And DeJounte Murray, obviously we know he's good in assists and steals. So yeah, a little bit of a mixture here depending on what you've drafted early on. So if you've missed out on a point guard, or maybe you have got a Kyrie Irving or a Donovan Mitchell early and you need some more assists, and other people have gone a Halliburton and a Trae Young, you're still going to come out with potentially two players that are averaging 10 to 12 assists between them. But yeah, I think this is a pretty nice tier here.
I would say that looking at those three, Jalen, Zach, and Brad Beal here, is that I know Beal's changing teams and he's going to cut down usage, but that's been accounted for in his positioning here. But looking at these three guys, I don't think there's really upside, but I also think that it's just really safe. Like it's just they're just going to what's Brown's next step? Is he going to become this ball handling assist wizard? I don't think so. Is Levine going to take a couple of shots off DeRozan? Maybe, but maybe not. He probably just does 25, 5 and 5 on 48 and 85, like he always does, like the same stuff all again. And Beal just probably goes from 27 points to 22 points and maybe gets an extra assist there. And it's just a real level of safety in those guys. And sometimes you want safety, sometimes you don't, depending on what else you've done. It's because as much as I know I will bang on about this continually, as much as we focus on the first round, the ways that you can come out with successful drafts is by getting 5 rounds of value on your pick, round 7 pick or whatever. Like that's how you end up being getting a win in a draft. Otherwise, there's a lot of scrambling and maneuvering and waiver wire stuff. But those are the ones that get you the win, not picking the guy 6th who finishes 5th. That doesn't do anything. It's finding those ones. So sometimes, I think my thing is each round that we go into a draft, we want to, whatever measurement you want to use, you want to up your level of upside or up your level of risk as each round moves on in the draft.
Your return on investment, so to speak.
Yeah, so like is this guy got a safe floor? And then that's really important in round 3. But in round 5, like can the round 5 guy go to round 4, or can he go to round 2? And once we get to round 5, that's an up in the air decision. But in round 7, the guy that can get to round 3, I'll definitely take over the guy that can get to round 5. Like that's just how we take those risks on things, because I haven't done an analysis on this, but I probably will or should at some point. But I'm reckoning a lot of picks that you pick in round 8 or round 9, like there's going to be a large percentage of them that end up getting dropped anyway, because just weird shit happens. So you might as well take that upside fly when a chunk of those guys are going to get dropped. In terms of tier 6 across the Durant system, I got Beal, Devin Vassell, and Zach LaVine, so a lot of the same names. Vassell popping his head in there. And then for points leagues, it's Scotland Barnes, Spencer Dinwiddie. We've got him as a shooting guard because, again, we saw that story today about Ben Simmons as the starting point guard, which I spoke about on this show about 3 weeks ago. So it looks like Simmons is going to be the starting point guard. Now, whether Dinwiddie starts or not, I don't know, but we've got him here, along with Vassell and Rozier in tier 6 for points leagues. Matt, I hope I've got your tier 7 correct. There you go. See, DeJounte was in tier 7 when I looked at this earlier. He's now in tier 6. So you've got DeJounte Murray and Tyrese Maxey. DeJounte Murray's ADP is very high, Matt. It's at 33 on Yahoo, 33 on Fantrax. Tyrese is at 58, 64, 82. I don't get it. I don't get Murray at 33. What are we banking on here?
Well, he's at 80. ADP is 33 because his ranking's probably 33 or something similar, because they're always linked.
Let's have a look. Where is he on this list? Because he wasn't that good last season, pretty clearly. Yeah, you're right. His rank is 34 over on Yahoo. Like, he wasn't that good, and they just think it was an off year and he's going back to the San Antonio. 1 year San Antonio production. I just think the 1 year is the blip there. He just is sort of who he is, I think, at this point. And between these two, I think it's a good spot to tier them, but Murray's going to go way off the board ahead of Maxey. But if you had to choose between these two, and they both are presented to you, which way are you going?
I'm still taking DeJounte Murray because I want that boost in assists and steals. I think I can find the scoring and the threes a little bit later on with Tyrese Maxey. Mm-hmm. And he still does have that James Harden trade hanging over him. If Harden goes, obviously he's going to, well, not obviously, but he should take a big boost depending on what comes back. But yeah, if Harden does happen to kiss and make up with Daryl Morey, then potentially Maxey just does what he did similar to last season. But and again, that's why I don't really trust the ADP data, because DeJounte Murray is at 34. People think, oh, he's 34, I need to take him in that range. Or a lot of people are still auto picking in drafts as well. So I think that's why those two are so closely linked and doesn't give us a true representation.
What is actually really wild, though, when looking at this mix, is that we've got them both in the same area, which is around round 5 sort of drafting area in terms of their value. But DeJounte is on ADP of 33, Tyrese is at 82 on ESPN. Like, that is a gigantic difference for guys that ostensibly, even if you argue one is ahead of the other, like it's not that big of a difference. And I know that ESPN's rank is like, he's actually 68 on ESPN. So people are looking at the top of that draft board and Max is at 68. They go, nah, we'll just let him sit for another round or so, which is always the things where I go, well, what's going on there? That rank's already too low. And then you're just letting him slide by even further. And that's where, like, we look at these guys in that similar tier where we could look at it and go, well, I would need to spend at this point a round 3 pick on DeJounte Murray. Could I actually get Tyrese in round 7 for the potential same sort of guy? Like I think that's the real killer value in this tier. It doesn't matter whether Murray or Maxey finish ahead of each other or whatever, but it's like when they're close enough and you've got discrepancies like that, that's when you can start to bring that value out, I think.
Yeah, and when you're doing mock drafts and you're looking at the top of your board and it's probably only showing the next 15 or 20 players, so it's a bit of out of sight, out of mind. And you see Tyrese Maxey down there in the 80s and think, I can wait on him because no one else is seeing him at the top of the draft board, so you can wait on them an extra round or two, and that's why it does affect their ADP.
Yep, absolutely. All right, my tier 7 over in Durant, well, there's Maxey again, with DeJounte Murray, with Scotty Barnes, with Terry Rozier, and in points leagues tier 7, it's Tyler Hero, Jalen Green, who is maybe 50 spots better in a points league, Anthony Simons, and Austin Reeves jumps in there to tier 7 on the points leagues. Matt, your tier 8, we've got Devin Vassell. We've got Scott Barnes over here. Again, Barnes could very easily, at the moment, I think Barnes actually listed as a small forward, power forward on Yahoo. He could also be their starting point guard. He could be their starting 2. Positions don't mean shit, but we're going to talk about it this way. And then there is Vassell, who's almost definitely locked in to be the shooting guard here on the Spurs. And another one of these ones where, Barnes 56 ADP on Yahoo, Vassell 91 on ESPN. 40 spots difference for guys who are pretty similar. Now, Barnes disappointed a lot of people last season. I don't know that disappointed me because I didn't have high expectations. Whereas I think Vassell probably disappointed me a little bit. If we're just going to look at these two guys strictly upside, like, who has a chance here to hit top 30? Because we are talking about picks in your round 6 or round 7, so you want to be able to hopefully, what can you hit a round 3 upside? Like, who do you think's got that chance, albeit 5% chance?
Yeah, I mean, midway through last season, I would have said Devin Vassell. I'm not sure I'm there now. I do have some concerns about the impact of Victor Wembanyama and how that impacts Devin Vassell. Is it going to help him because it gives him easier shots on the perimeter, and it also gives him more license to roam on defense because he's got Victor behind him? Or does it impact his usage because everything is going through Victor and, the ball's going through Jeremy Sohan, and then they add another piece next year, and then they bring in a big name free agent and Devin Vassell becomes, basically a 3rd or 4th option. So I'm really interested to see how that, his game and he develops and where he, sits in that Spurs pecking order over the next 2, 3, 4 seasons. And again, with Toronto, really interested to see what they do with Scotty Barnes. Is he going to be, their full-time point guard? Is he going to just be a second ball handler? Is he the piece or the face of the franchise over the next decade? Or is he going to be, potentially a trade piece? So, and again, 2 different plays. You've got the steals and threes from Vassell. You've got the assists in particular from Scotty Barnes. Again, comparing 2 different players, but their overall value comes out in a similar range. Yeah,
they are. Now, I'm pretty high on Vassell as a player. I think this, year 4 here, is it year 4? Year 5? I think it's year 4. I think it might be the year he really starts to blow up and really establish himself again with more eyes in San Antonio as well as a elite perimeter player who can defend and shoot and even pass a little bit. But we'll see. Tier 8 in...
Does he get to like Desmond Bane level?
I think that his peak is better than Desmond Bane. Yeah, I think that can he get to what Bane produces now? It's going to take a big jump in efficiency, but I think he can be a better player overall than Bane. Tier 8 on Durant is a lot bigger. As we get down the list, the tiers tend to flare a lot of the time. Dinwiddie, Austin Reeves, Tyler Hero, Buddy Hield, Kevin Huerter, Shaden Sharp, and Josh Hart. Again, tiers don't mean ranks or anything like that, or rounds or anything like that. These guys are just all in similar sort of areas, whereas points leagues, it's Jaden Ivey, Jordan Clarkson, Shaden Sharp, and Benedict Mathurin there in Tier 8. Tier 9, this is the one, Matt, you had to panic message me today. Oh, I got to change it. I got to get Austin Reeves into Tier 9, and here he is, along with Tyler HERRO and Terry Rozier. There is, again, big discrepancies in ADPs. You've got Reeves going outside the top 100, even on Fantrax, which stuns me, to be honest. That's crazy to me. Whereas HERRO, there is uncertainty about what the hell team he plays for. And then Terry Rozier, who did struggle last season and won't handle the ball as much, but can the efficiency jump back up? I think all three of these guys have got arguments to be able to push or at least nudge the top 50. Who would you say is most likely to do it?
Well, Tyler HERRO is a really tricky one because we don't know where he will be playing this season. Right now, obviously, he's in Miami, but will he end up in Portland? And if he's in Portland, is he sort of the number 1 or number 2 next to Jeremy Grant? Terry Rozier, we've seen him put up sort of top 40, top 50 value in the past. I'm not convinced he can get back to it. Austin Reeves, yeah, why not? If LeBron sits games and Anthony Davis is injured, who else there in LA is going to, take on, a big role there? And, we saw last season when he had 22 games as a starter, he averaged 15 points, 3.5 rebounds, over 4 assists, 1.6 threes, and he was shooting 51% from the field and 89% from the free throw line. So obviously those percentages are very, very strong, and we'll see if he can keep them up. But yeah, plenty of upside with Austin Reeves, and yeah, really like what he offers going into drafts this season.
I like Reeves. He does have a lack of defensive stats. That is a problem. He shot like 63% from 2 or something like that. And that's a little bit where my worry lies, that if he's forced into a larger usage role, like Mikal Bridges was, even in Phoenix and in Brooklyn, where that usage stepped up and that 64% 2-point shooting went to 55%, Reeves is not going to get 30 usage like Bridges did, but if he jumps it up and becomes literally that third guy instead of D'Angelo Russell, that maybe that high level, 51, 85 or whatever he's shooting comes back to 47, and that hurts when it's not being boosted by the defensive stats that he just isn't bringing. So there is a risk there. I think HERRO is probably got the high, like he could be, given the right scenario, he could get close to Jordan Poole's projected numbers from this season would be my guess. Maybe,
yeah, I mean, if you compare Tyler HERRO and Zach LaVine as well, there's not a real lot of difference between their output and their stat set. And this is one article that I do write in the off season called the backup plan, and I won't give it away because Basketball Monster members know what it's about. But it is. Tyler HERRO and Zach LaVine do offer very, very similar numbers.
Let's look at the Durant tiers there. Big one here for Tier 9 in shooting guards. Josh Richardson, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Anthony Simons, Jalen Green, Jordan Clarkson, Benedict Mathurin. So as you can see, Tier 9 is the back end of the draft. And in points leagues, it's Joshy Hart, Kevin Huerter, Norman Powell, Buddy Hield, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Kevin Porter Jr. I slotted in here as well. Gary Trent there too. And then I think Tier 9 goes a little bit longer. Yeah, it's pretty big. Categories, it's Bogdan Bogdanovic, Suggs, Grimes, Ivy, Amen Thompson, Norman Powell, and then Amen Thompson and Trey Murphy in points league. So my Tier 9 is relatively large because, Matt, one thing that, we'll get into your Tier 10 in a second. One thing that we can look at, and I think this is something that gets reflected in auction drafts a lot as well, is the last 50 guys. Like, what's the difference? Like, when you go into an auction draft, like all these guys are $1 or $2 players, and we look at them, well, you took this guy in round 10 and this guy in round 13. Bro, they're the same. There's actually not a gigantic difference between all these guys. Hence why this tiering system that I've got here is putting so many of these players together. Because again, when you look at it from an auction perspective as well, all these guys are $1 players or $2 players. It's not the end of the world. The difference between them is absolutely minute in terms of how we view them. And I think again that there is, I'm probably guilty of it too, of over criticizing certain spots when, man, there's 40 spots can change like that towards the end of a draft.
Yeah, and you look at those players you've got there in your Durant tier, and they all offer something a little bit different as well. The Suggs, the steals, the Jaden Ivey, the assists. Amen Thompson, we think the steals and assists combined. Norman Powell is the points and the threes and the good efficiency. So, again, it completely depends what you need at the back end of your roster. And a lot of these guys, are just going to be streamed through in standard leagues.
Let's have a look at your Tier 10. It is. Now, you do have Scoot Henderson here in this one. I'm guessing because on our depth chart at Basketball Monster, he's sitting at shooting guard because of Dame still being there, but he's not really going to play this position very much. We've got Spencer Dinwiddie, Trey Murphy in this group as well, and who's the other one? Anthony Simons in that group too, that's correct, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know. Dinwiddie's moved down in your other tiers. All these changes after I made the graphics. Anyway, it doesn't matter that much. All these guys in this same area. People will talk about Trey Murphy's ranking from last season, Matt, and they'll say, well, he was actually a top 30 player or whatever it was, which of course is entirely misleading, because if you're going to claim that he was a top 30 player next year, then have the balls to draft him in the first 3 rounds, and no one will, because that's not realistic or a representation of the value that he provided. I do worry that they're going to just stick him in a 29-minute-a-night role and limit what he does. Down the end of the stretch, he was playing like 37 a night and dominating. So I am a little worried for him. When I look at that group, the 2 Portland guys have significant upside, like absolutely gigantic upside out of that group, and I would probably target both of those guys. And Simons is a guy that I did this show earlier in the week. I think he had, out of all the Yahoo ADPs over the last 7 days, he was, out of the draftable players, the guy that fell the most, which was a little weird to me.
That is very weird, and yeah, I would target both of them as well. I mean, Spencer Dinwiddie averaged 9 assists last season with Brooklyn, which is an incredible number, and I don't think he'll get back to that mark again. But
no chance.
Yeah, Scoot Henderson and Anthony Simons, complete upside. And again, we need to wait and see what happens with Dame Lillard. But if he's moved and there's not too many pieces coming back, then yeah, the runway's pretty clear for both of those guys. And another guy we're going to talk about in a couple of tiers' time. Yeah,
we will get into him. I'm sure you know who that is. We'll get to him very soon. Getting towards the end of the Durant tiers, it's Kevin Porter, Karis LeVert, and Gary Trent there in tier 10. And for points leagues, Malik Monk, Herb Jones, Quentin Grimes, and Josh Richardson towards the end there, who I do believe is going to start in Miami. But of course, so much can change with that team. Let's look at your tier 11, Matt. Now, you did have Austin Reeves there, but I forgot you moved him up. So we've got a blank tier 11. That will take us into tier 12, which is now tier 11. Joshy Hart, Budrick Hield, Kevin Huerter, and old mate Shaden Sharp, who I don't actually know what they're going to do with him, because if Dame does get traded, players will come back, but will they actually go Sharp, Simons, Henderson as the starting group, or will Thibault be in there? Like, we can have this level of hype for Shaden, but it's not the clearest path at the moment.
No, it's not. I would think, well, one of those guys will come off the bench and be that 6th man. I'm not sure whether it'll be Sharp or Simons.
I'd say there's no way that it's Simons, surely. I know Sharp is their future, but Simons is 24 and he has actually established himself, and I would think that he would get at least an opportunity to start for a bit.
Is Simons a 3rd option starting caliber guard on a championship team?
What do you mean 3rd? Well, as in like a shooting guard with 2 better players in the lineup?
Like hypothetically, like a Bradley Beal role, like in Phoenix.
No.
Like I don't know if he's got that level in him.
No.
I think he is similar to Tyrese Maxey, where he's probably maxed out, pardon the pun, as sort of that 6-man elite scoring option off the bench.
I think part of the problem for me with Simons is, the defense is atrocious, but also I think he functions better as a point guard, and that's just not going to happen here with Lillard and now with Scoot. Like, it's just not going to happen. So I think that him playing exclusively as a 2, he's fine at it, but I think he's better actually handling the ball. But then when he does handle the ball, what's your team's upside? He's one of those guys, well, he's actually best when he's doing this, but then that makes your team worse. And then when you put him into a situation that makes your team better, he gets significantly worse, and there's probably better players who can fill that role. Like in that role, Devin Vassell, I think, is a better player than Anthony Simons. But if you needed someone to get you from 20 wins to 35 wins and push to the play-in with the ball in their hand as their point guard, well, Simons is going to do that at a higher level. And that's, even when you talk about real NBA tiers or rankings or anything, like we have these lists and this guy's better than this. Well, it's all bloody context dependent, right? It's all who's around you. Like, what are you being asked to do? Can you do this certain thing, or can you not do this thing, or do you fit in perfectly doing a lesser role that someone better wouldn't be able to do? Like, that is all really, really important and doesn't get discussed enough. Buddy Hield has the absolute dog's balls there of ADP data compared to everyone else. It's just standing out. 76 with a Yahoo ADP, which, Matt, is crazy. I don't get it. Like, yes, he shoots relatively well, but Bruce Brown, Ben McMathurin, even Andrew Nembhard, there's no minutes upside for Bud, and I'm not wasting a 7th round pick on him.
No, and last season he did have that top 60 season, but prior to that he was 92nd and 77. So that top 60 is and was an outlier. So I think he's probably more back in that probably 100 range this season. And like you said, got more competition for playing time. And again, his number one category is 3-pointers, which again you can find later in drafts and easily streaming off the waiver wire. So I think you can use that pick a little bit wiser and find something more valuable.
Like, it's an interesting group, right? I don't think Josh Hart's got particularly high upside. I don't think Herder does. Sharp, we just talked about the pitfalls there. So even though there's no way I'm looking at Bud at 76 or 80, but out of this group, he probably would be the guy that I would take, even though he's not going to be available at the same time. So that is a weird little bit of a conundrum. The value probably all is the same, but I have question marks about the other three.
But you're talking about upside, and
that is true. That's Sharp then, obviously. That has to be Sharp.
Yeah, and bring the biggest return on investment. That has to be Shaden Sharp. Like, if Lillard's gone, even if Tyler HERRO comes back and then they can ship off, Simons. I mean, like we saw at the end of last season, I know the Trailblazers packed away pretty much their whole lineup, but he was averaging nearly 24 points and 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 threes, and just went berserk. So that upside he's already shown. So yeah, I mean, if you can get Austin Reeves and Shaden Sharp, at the back end of the draft, and one of them hits, you're going to be in a pretty good position.
I agree. And the last tier, Matt, which just disappeared on me because I didn't put the right thing up, as people see behind the scenes. Again, just technical difficulties, Matt. I'm just struggling. It's too late at night here for me to do this. All right, tier 13, Josh Richardson, Gary Trent, Jordy Clarkson, Jalen Green. Also, Jalen Green's ADP data is the same as Buddy Hield because that's where he should go in a points league. So that does skew things quite a bit there. I'm very happy to take Jordan Clarkson. In fact, Josh Richardson doesn't even have ADP data, which is pretty weird. I think all of those guys have significant value, and it's is part of the thing where we talk about these 4 guys, the 4 guys in the previous tier, that if you didn't get a shooting guard early, there is a decent amount of them who are going to be around 11, round 12, who can actually, like Jalen Green could jump 40 spots. He might not, but when we talk about the way that rankings are distributed, that a jump from 42% or whatever he shot up to 48% or even 46% or 77 from the line to 81. Well, it might be 50 spots just from doing those 2 things. And is year 3 like this? It's not outrageous to suggest that he would do that.
Yeah, and that's what he needs to do. He needs to improve his efficiency, needs to somehow improve his assists and steals as well. He's good in his score.
His assists did go up last season. That might be harder this season with the men and Fred VanVleet, but a lot of his counting stats did go up, or steals maybe not, but the assists went up a pretty sizable amount.
Yeah, and then, like I said, that's the issue this year when you bring in VanVleet and Amen Thompson. Like, the ball's going to go to him to basically score and shoot rather than facilitate. And similar with Gary Trent, he's, again, will be that steals and 3-point specialist, whether he's starting or coming off the bench. Jordan Clarkson, again, sort of that 20 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, just does what he needs to do. And pretty sort of safe pick at the back end of the draft as well.
It's going to be really interesting to see Gary Trent, who couldn't get a single steal to save his life as he played for Portland, played for Nick Nurse, and then got every steal in the world. Is that Trent? Was that Nurse? What does Darko Rajakovic do in terms of how aggressive it is Gary? Because that's really the only thing that made people want to froth him in fantasy, is he was getting 2 steals a game. And that was, I think, it'll be shown a little bit more this season. I think it was a lot of coaching that enabled him to be in that position. Speaking of coaching, Raptors fans seem to be taking it really well that Jordi Fernandez is coaching his ass off in the World Cup, and they go, man, why didn't we get this guy? He's motivating everyone in all these huddles that people are seeing in the World Cup. But that's going to be interesting to me for Trent to see whether A, he gets the starters minutes, because he didn't when Pirtle arrived last season, or B, is the scheme going to be just act like a crazy person and try and generate steals in passing lanes, because that was Nick Nurse's defense a lot of the time, and we don't know whether Rajakovic is going to do that.
Yeah, and that's, again, something else to make note of now and monitor during training camp. Like we said, with Scotty Barnes, Dennis Schroeder, and now Gary Trent, like, how do all those 3 fit into the mix? How will they be used, and how will they fit into the new system?
it is going to be something interesting to watch, and I hope this was something interesting to watch as well. Matt, shooting guard tiers are in the books. We'll have small forward tiers coming tomorrow, assuming there's no, again, run of technical difficulties. Thank you once again for coming on, Matt, and chatting to me about the shooting guards across the NBA.
Anytime. Appreciate it, mate. Thank you.
And that will do it for me today. Don't forget, follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app and on YouTube. The old thumb it up, subscribe, notification bell, blah, blah, blah. I think we're done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.